Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irish Repertory Theatre and the second part of our special two-day event, A Beggar upon Horseback and a Beggar on Foot. Today, A Beggar on Foot.
Which of course comes from the W.B. Yeats poem, Hurray for revolution and more cannon shot, the beggar on horseback lashes the beggar on foot. Hurray for revolution and cannon come once more, the beggars have changed places, but the lash goes on. We took this title from Yeats's poem because we've got some very important things to talk about today, and we're so privileged to have such an extraordinary array of people here, led by the wonderful Dr. Miriam Nehan Gray, who's been a great inspiration to us as we put together these two, last night's program and today's program. And we're also deeply honored to have a wonderful Consul General of Ireland, Kieran Madden. Kieran is a very good name, who will be joining us, and we're just about to ask him to come on. Thank you all for joining us. Here we go.
Charlotte, Kieran, again, thank you for last night, thank you for today, and thank you for the nice words. Last evening, there was an event looking at the shared history, the intersections of the Irish Americans, and African Americans here in the United States. I know there's some overlap of audience between the two events, so I don't want to repeat everything I said last night. But it's probably no harm to give some sense of why the Irish consulate, the Irish government, is part of this discussion. In summary, the homogeneity of the audiences we have traditionally reached here in the United States, as wonderful as those audiences are, is not reflective of Ireland, the United States, or Irish America. Ireland is changing. 1 in 6 of the population were not born on the island, and there is much greater diversity among those who are born there. It's a long way from the Ireland in which I grew up, and let me reassure you, that's only a good thing. Coupled with the estimate that up to 1/3 of Irish Americans have some Irish heritage, and the superb Lenwood Sloan, from whom you will hear shortly, says it may be as high as 38%. It's clear that we need to do more to reach those we have not been reaching. We must ensure that Irish America is open and welcoming to all. As I understand it, if last night's event was looking backwards at the history, today we look at what we can do now and in the future, in particular through culture. My role as Consul General gives me great privilege. It allows me to do some really special things. For me, one of the most special was at the end of last year in Philadelphia, when I had a chance to meet and sit down with Dr. Lonnie Bunch, the Secretary of the Smithsonian, the first African American to head the world's largest museum system. As well as being a historian, an innovator, and a leader, and the founder of the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., Dr. Bunch has for decades been an advocate for greater diversity in museums and other cultural institutions. In August just past, Dr. Bunch sat down virtually with the leaders of many of Ireland's leading cultural institutions, the National Gallery and the National Library, the Abbey Theatre, the Epic Museum, Chester Beatty Library, the Crawford Gallery, Other Voices, and many more, to discuss diversity and what they could do. There was a hunger in that conversation to learn and a demonstrated willingness to do more in terms of what is presented, to do more in terms of how it is presented, and ultimately about who is represented in those institutions. There's no single right answer to what we can do. I don't think any of the institutions are starting from scratch, but there's momentum in this conversation now, and we must capitalize upon it. Cultural presenters and institutions can go places that dull bureaucrats like me can't possibly go. Through art, they can look at past, present, and future all at once. They can look at the dark history through a lens different from that of a historian, and that is essential. Ultimately, they can and do challenge us to do better. That said, the bureaucrats have a role too. This is a shared effort, a collective effort, and a collective responsibility. We are in it together. At the consulate here in New York, and I know I'm speaking for all of Ireland's consulates across the United States, we want to be supportive. We want to be involved. We don't need to be everywhere, but we do want to be anywhere that we can be of use to all of you in this discussion. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Lastly, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Miriam Nehan Gray. Most of you will have heard Dr. Nehan Gray speak last evening. She's been a great partner for the consulate in almost everything we have done in this regard. over the last 2 years. And I know that both personally, herself and institutionally through Glucksman Ireland House, she has been a catalyst for much of what has been done in this regard across the New York Irish community over the last number of years. We're lucky to have her, and now I'm lucky to hand over to her. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Miriam Lyhengray.
Sorry, folks, amateur mistake there. I was on mute. Thank you, Kieran. I'll never call you a dull bureaucrat. I assure you. Thank you for that introduction to today, and thank you to Kieran and Charlotte and the team at the Irish Repertory Theatre for conceiving of these events yesterday evening, last night, and today. I believe the link to yesterday's event, if any of you missed it or would like to go back or reshare it, it will be made available in the chat. And please do go back and immerse yourself a little bit in the history of this topic. Today's program is about, I guess, to Kieran's point, looking to the future a little bit and entering into these conversations that we can as institutions. And there is no better way to do that than for us to bring in the voices of people who have inhabited spaces in terms of performance and theatre, and more generally in terms of cultural organisations that contribute to our understanding of the diversity of the Irish experience in Ireland and in abroad. So for today's programme, the first part of the session, I will be moderating a conversation with three essentially practitioners in terms of creative spaces and people who have interconnected in terms of Blackness and the Irish experience, actually collectively over many years. The second part of the panel, we'll bring in individuals from various organizations, mainly here in the New York City area, and talk a little bit about what we can do as organizations and as individuals and as activists to really further these missions in terms of pushing back on the boundaries of what constitutes Irishness, especially in creative spaces where, to Kieran's point, we have immense freedom and imagination to push ourselves beyond expectations of what ethnicity or race is, quote unquote, supposed to dictate. In that vein, Grace Odumosu, who is a member of the panel, the first part of our panel, she rather flippantly, not accidentally, but casually shared a piece which she created herself recently as part of the Black History Month in Ireland celebration. And when I saw this, and indeed when I shared it with Kieran and Charlotte and the team at the Irish Rep, it made sense with Grace's permission to share this with the audience today. It's a short video, and in a way it encapsulates so much of what I expect we will talk about today. And it's a real honor and personal privilege to have this opportunity to share Grace's work with you all right now. So without further ado, that's my cue to the magic people behind the scenes who make these things work. If we can cut to Grace Odumosu's work here today.
I grew up in a world where I couldn't see. I grew up in a world that didn't belong to me. Books and movies, magical characters. Hermione Granger could have been a black actor. Millions of roles, but none for me. A brown Irish lead, that would never be. Brown and exotic, I was unique. But she got there first. My career looked bleak. Not black, not white, nothing, an other. I only saw my reflection when I looked at my brother. Call me the N-word, tell me to go home. Your fear of my skin, that's yours, that you own. You've no idea what it takes to be me. People can be mean without even intending to be. Did you put your finger into a plug? At my heart, that one did tug. I wanted to be white, to have straight hair, to be accepted as Irish, for people to care. Living in this skin, I've had to survive. If given the chance, this brown girl can thrive. The future's not written, possibilities endless. An equal, balanced world. We've all got to end this. Everyone has a journey. It's not always easy living. I just want you to see the skin that I live in.
That was a powerful piece. As I said, I think it really sets the tone. I'd like to introduce onto our screens now Grace Odumosu. Grace is the Youth and Family Engagement Coordinator for Irish Community Services in Chicago. She is an Irish-Nigerian actor born and raised in Dublin, and she immigrated to Chicago in 2014. Grace has an extensive background in theatre, both in Dublin and in Chicago. She has been working with children and young adults in the arts since she was 16. She holds a BA in acting from the Dublin Institute of Technology and a master's degree in drama therapy at NUI Maynooth. Welcome, Grace, and thank you again for allowing us to share your work, and I look forward to further conversation on it.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm very excited to be here. And thanks for wanting to share my work.
I'm going to bring on Carletta and Lenwood, and then I feel like we go back to the video piece to speak, because it literally speaks volumes. Carletta Downs has been a founding member and the first VP of the Pearson College Alumni Association, and advisory board member and founding member of Self-Help Africa, and a VP of Social Derivatives Project Management at Goldman Sachs. She has been a board member of Origin Theatre Company since 2015 and board chair since 2017. In this position, she has provided leadership to fellow board members in the promotion of fundraisers, events, and programs that deliver perspectives on national identity, cross-cultural relations, and global understanding. Carletta has a degree in liberal arts and sciences from Pearson College, UWC. Hi, Carletta. I think your Wi-Fi is holding up, and it's wonderful to have you here today. You're on mute.
Another rookie mistake, Thanks very much, Miriam.
Thank you.
And I'm thanks to the Irish Rep for giving us this platform to have such a really important discussion that I think is right now the right time.
Agreed. Last but not least, Lenwood Sloan, who I'll take liberties and refer to in my friendly way as Lenny, is well known across the United States as a catalytic agent, animator, and facilitator of cultural and heritage programs. His artistic credits include creating the Art in the Marketplace programs for the Rouse Corporation in New Orleans, St. Louis, Boston, and Baltimore. In addition, he participated in the artistic team for 5 national public television documentaries: Treme Untold Story, Emmy Award-winning Ethnic Notions, Stephen Foster, the internationally acclaimed Reimagining Ireland, and the Emmy Award-winning Dance Black America. American audiences have enjoyed multiple works created by Lenny, including national tours of 13 Lessons, a play about adult literacy. Voodoo Macbeth, voted one of the 10 best plays of the New South. The Creole Mass, commissioned for the St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. her Talking Drums and Williams and Walker for Off-Broadway's American Place Theatre, Sweet Saturday for Brooklyn Academy of Music, and the internationally acclaimed The Wake, which received the San Francisco Drama Critics Award before touring Berlin Fest, Adelaide Festival, Holland's Festival International, and 20 cities in the United States. For the last 30 years, he has collaborated with my colleague, the renowned Mick Maloney, presenting programs, concerts, and masterclasses on the convergence, contributions, and conflicts of Black and Irish experiences in the United States. Their collaboration has taken the pair from New York to San Francisco and Cuba and to Limerick, Ireland. Lenny, always great to see you.
Great to see you, and thank you very much for inviting me into this august circle and for allowing Carletta and Grace and I to continue our conversations and exchanges.
Well, I suppose for the next, say, 20 minutes or so, we've the pleasure of, I have the pleasure of being in conversation with the three of you. I've given your formal biographies there in terms of people locating you, but maybe if we go back to you, Grace, and because there's so much said there, literally and visually and artistically in terms of the piece we opened up with through your generosity. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you come into all this space for us?
Yeah, so obviously my name is Grace and I'm an actor from Dublin. I live in Chicago now, but I started acting when I was around 4. And for me, kind of in the way that the piece states, it was a way for me to be seen, because I never felt seen. The only time I ever really felt seen was when I was playing a character, and that's not me, that's a character. And so I really enjoyed becoming something different so that people would see me and just see, enjoy whatever it was that I was performing in. The first play I think I ever did was called My Sorny, and I played the lead and I just got the bug. So that's where I came from. And then I continued on and I did my degree in acting. And I guess to get to the point of a lot of the that I stated in the poem was there was no place for me really in Irish theatre or the Irish media. As soon as I left college, I just found myself stumped, not really sure where to go, not really sure what to do. I was never called in for a white role because I'm not white enough. And any of the Black roles that I got called in for, I wasn't Black enough. They wanted someone who was black. And not mixed Black, so it just was very difficult for me to see a career. And there's a line in it in the poem where it's I said, oh, but she got there first, my career looked bleak, because there is actually an extremely talented and famous and beautiful and wonderful, and I absolutely bow down to her, mixed race Irish actor. Her name is Ruth Nega. And she was actually played the lead in Loving. She's wonderful, but like that, it was like, oh, there's only space for one, So yeah, I guess I jabbered on a little bit there, but there's a little bit about me and where I come from and why I'm in this space.
Thank you, Grace. Carletta, maybe we can hear a little bit from you instead of me go into the formality of your biography. Tell us a little bit more about you and your activities.
Yeah, sure. I've always been interested in theater, and life took a turn after high school away from theatrical pursuits, and I ended up in investment banking. When I left investment banking thinking that I was retiring, George Heslin grabbed me up and stuffed me into the Origin Theater Company family, where I've had some wonderful times and wonderful years sort of fulfilling that give back in the theatrical space. I didn't expect that it would be in a European theater company. Definitely, there's a big Irishness about origin theater. What I appreciate is broadening out beyond that. And in broadening out beyond that, we've come across some theatrical productions that talk to the aspect of race and how it impacts and how people are viewed, and to identity. As Grace had been saying, and having mixed race children myself, my husband's from Dublin, as many people would know. So seeing Irish spaces as someone outside of the diaspora, but very much connected to the diaspora, it's been a really eye-opening and interesting perspective. And I think that what I can bring to theater and the opportunity to broaden the imagination and the opportunity to help those who are behind the scenes in the way that I am, to open their mind to the idea that there is room for more than one, because there is more than one, and the diversity of those are what we're looking for in theater. And it's we can do that in the spaces that we inhabit because imagination allows us to.
Thank you, Carletta. Lenny, will you tell us a little bit about you and your background in this space?
In this space is a wonderful phrase to use. First of all, I'm dying to go back and speak to Grace about that line that she only sees herself in her brother's face, and also to expand on Carlotta's statement about imagining ourselves in other roles, but also directors and playwrights imagining us in those roles. Those are two very important things. My life is full of the junction between opportunity and imagination. I had the opportunity in San Francisco to be asked by the De Young Museum to create musical and dance programs for an exhibition called American More or Less. And American More or Less was supposed to be a series of lectures around the Rockefeller Foundation and the Rockefeller family donating their paintings to the De Young Museum. Those paintings are 1850 to 1912. And so on the committee, after I spoke about classical dance and Fanny Elsler and Lola Montez, I asked, well, how about the minstrel shows? And everybody dropped their teeth on the floor and said, what? You want us to do a minstrel show for the Rockefellers in the De Young Museum? I said, we can't cover that period without covering that American phenomenon that was the defining element of American theater from 1850 to 1912. So they said, well, you know, if you think we should do a minstrel show in the museum, then you need to do it yourself. And that is how I became totally immersed in this phenomena of Irish men in blackface, insulting the powers to be through song, joke, and ridicule, and at the same time creating caricatures, stereotypes, and derogatory statements about urban Black men. It took me on a tremendous journey, and I was totally immersed in that phenomena of Irish men in blackface on the American stage. And I have been captured by that subject for the last 30 years. Upon that journey, I was blessed to meet Mick Maloney, where we explored the banjo, the fiddle, and the dance floor as the common ground between those two racial tensions and that racial phenomena of white men in blackface. I fell in love with the African-American vaudevillian Bert Williams, and decided that I was going to do a wake for blackface using the format of the Irish wake, which is the common ground between Irish culture and Caribbean and New Orleans culture, and awake for the famous men, black and white, who were stuck in blackface comedy. So here I am today on that junction. Just one other thing is, on that journey, my father died, and while we were cleaning up his room, I found a picture of his great grandfather that I had completely forgotten. That reminded me that my father's grandfather, my great grandfather, was an Irishman. And so since my father's death in 2005, I've been on a journey to discover Thomas More of Gilkey, the myth and the secret of my family, and his daughters who passed for white, and his daughters and sons who were too dark, but therefore were black. So I've been unfolding my own story while I have been discovering the story of the American theater.
In our preparation for this event and the opportunity we've had to chat, one of the issues that we kind of touched upon, and I'd like us to, reflect on it collectively here for the benefit of our audience, is that the kind of great plays of, the great Irish plays, right, are were written or conceived, or we seem to be locked into conceiving of them as being played by kind of white characters. Grace, you gave us an example. I think it was a Sean O'Casey play. Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so what we were talking about was I was telling you that, like, O'Casey, specifically The Plough and the Stars, is one of my favorite plays, and since the first time I read it, I always wanted to play Nora. But there was no way I was ever going to get called in to play Nora. It wasn't, people think, the old Irish plays, that they are about white people. And so therefore, no director, no casting, nobody would ever think to see me in that role. And therefore, it's like I was never going to get to play Nora or to play in any of the old Irish plays, let alone new Irish plays, which I'm sure people are writing about different coloured Irish people. I hope they are. But I also hope that there are people out there who are envisioning these old plays, these wonderful plays, and just envisioning them with a different, with an open mind, and that there might be space for people who look like me in that. I mean, there is space. I think there's space, but hopefully the world can. And just to get to the point of, like, theater is not real. When we go to the theater, we go there and we immerse ourselves in this world, and we are transported. Yeah. It makes me laugh, because I don't understand then why, if theater is not real, why it's so unreal to have a Nora who is not white.
Carletta or Lenny, have you had any kind of experiences in that vein, or anything to comment on that?
I'll yield to Carletta.
Yeah, I would. Oh, thank you, Lenny. Thank you. I would like to speak to that, because what I think is lacking is risk taking, and risk taking is lacking because of a commercial responsibility or a commercial aspect to theater. One of the beautiful things about being part of a nonprofit is that we can take those risks, and we have the opportunity to visualize a different way of presenting something that has been around for a while, like The Plough and the Stars, but new plays as well. When we were speaking, Lenny spoke of wanting to play the lead in Death of a Salesman, and why shouldn't he? But why is it that, or we need to open our minds away from presenting it as, a feature, that the lead role could be a Black man, or to put on The Plow and the Stars with a fully Black cast as like that's the feature of it, rather than to, you know, get to the character. The actor is a person, they're a human. And because you suspend belief when you go into a theater anyway, you're meant to give the actor the chance to let them be the character. And it doesn't matter what color they are, as long as you get to believe in that character.
I want to echo that. First of all, Miriam, this is a complex subject. And so let me break it down into at least three parts. There are the productions which are the all Black this or the all Black that. We're going to do the all Black showboat, you know, or we're going to do the all Black guys and dolls, you know. And that is an extravaganza, but it doesn't necessarily speak to the soul, the dramatic spirit of the Black actor. We are not, that's a reverse minstrel show to me. We are not bringing Black souls and Black spirits forward. We're putting Black men and women in white faces. So there's that perception. Then there's the perception of what is called colorblind casting. And you know, a lot of my colleagues feel very good about colorblind casting. This is an editorial opinion. Colorblind casting is like missionary work to me. It's like looking down instead of looking across, looking up. You know, so I had the distinct privilege in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the Mixed Blood Theater company there, which is a great company of Black and white actors, to do Fred Astaire in Holiday Inn in colorblind casting. By the way, it was the hardest role that I've ever done, because I don't know how Fred Astaire got that many rhythms in a single bar of music. It was my hardest thing. But I was acutely aware, both in the cast, and directing, and in the audience, that I was playing a white character, and they were accepting me in this suspended animation. You know, what I hope for is when we get to visionary casting, where the director and the casting director can see the spirit of who you are connected in that role. That's why I want to play Willie Lomax. I understand that man. I understand. My uncle was a Fuller brush salesman and a vacuum cleaner salesman, you know, and he had two families, one on the road and one, you know, at home. And I lived that experience. And I used to say to directors, I have lived this experience. And finally, my first career, ladies, was with the Joffrey Ballet Company. I was never in the performing company. I was always in the school, in the student company, in the second company. And, you know, I used to speak to Mr. Arpino, who I love. I was his acolyte and his assistant as he choreographed. That role, I could do that role. You know, well, first of all, Grace, they had Christian Holder. They had a Black dancer already. You know, he got there first. I love that. You know, so he was the Black dancer who danced the Blackamoor in Petrushka. He was the Black dancer who played Caliban in Taming of the Shrew. And as much as I love the Joffrey, they never perceived of the weightless spirit. And that's why I love what you said also about theater is illusion. Theater is fiction. You know, if I was to suspend my animation in Swan Lake, you know, then surely I could play one of those roles. And so I've had to write and direct and create roles about myself and for the ability of other Black actors and actresses, and also for mixed race people. And Grace, I would tell you, as you had the experience of being light, I have the experience of being dark. My mother bleached my skin every day from the day I came out of her womb until the day I left for college. And she used to say, you know, if you could just be a little lighter, you could get really great roles, you know. And so I grew up, even in the woman who loved me so dearly that she gave me life, still looked through the prism of colorism.
I guess, you know, when we think about the theatre and we think about its relationship to Irish identity, and I guess, you know, like leaving the focus on in the United States, so outside of Ireland for now, because we're all here. You know, and it's the same in terms of other cultural spaces. You know, I'm sure Lenny could speak to, like, in spaces of like music performance, or even if you go into sports, you know, Irish sports and stuff like that. This, you know, entanglement and definition of Irishness only meaning whiteness is what we're trying to push back on in different ways in terms of our lived experiences and what we're saying. And I think in the theatre space, where we've come out of a history, if I put on my historian's cap, and we talked about this when we spoke the other day, this, you know, dominance of the national narrative in terms of Ireland asserting itself in terms of its independence. Do we, you know, do we, I guess I'm going around this a long way to say, how do we expand those boundaries of representation and pushing back on those in, is it, it's institutional and it's creatively. Have you found ways to shortcut, to circumvent some of these boundaries in terms of your what you've done personally?
Or you are, which one of us are?
Whoever, a very roundabout, long-winded question. So whoever's brave enough to try and answer.
I would say that I use a little hip glossary for the purpose of navigating through life. And it has 4 terms in it. Cultural specificity, cultural diversity, multiculturalism, and cultural assimilation. Cultural specificity is I'm Black, you're Irish, I'm digging your Blackness, you dig my Irishness. Cultural specificity is us all being Irish on St. Patrick's Day, and all being Mexican on Cinco de Mayo, and, you know, and all enjoying Chinese New Year. You know, this is about your culture, and I'm going to applaud you today. And so there is work that is culturally specific. Cultural diversity is I'm Black and you're Irish, and I see in your Irishness something that reminds me of my identity and something that connects to my narrative and my experience. And you see in my Blackness reflections of your own pain, joy, laughter, sorrow. And so let us share this common ground, and let us make a place where both can be in the same pot, but we don't lose identity. And I say pot because I use the metaphor, Grace, of gumbo. In gumbo, everything goes into the pot, but the okra doesn't become sausage, and the sausage doesn't become shrimp. But they kind of live in the roux together, you know, and they kind of jam together and they add flavor to each other. Multiculturalism is like minestrone soup. Minestrone meaning to marry. Multiculturalism is pizza bagels and fajita pitas. You know, multiculturalism is blended cultures, blended experiences, so that each goes into the pot and they make each other stronger and something new comes out of that. And there's a whole body of multicultural work that's coming forward now. Jazz is multicultural. You know, this is why I love river dance, because the dance that they are presenting to us is about the great gumbo of cultures. Assimilation is where we have so blended that there is no line or distinction between the two of us. And this is why I am fascinated in the stories that Grace and the stories that Carletta tell me about their children, because their children are assimilated children. The problem with assimilation is the outside forces force you to choose one. You know, I mean, you know, like you must declare yourself. You know, my friends and family are like, why do you want to find out about Grandpa Moore? Why can't you just leave that alone? You know, I'm not trying to be Grandpa Moore. I'm not, look at my skin, you all. I am not trying to pass myself off as Irish. I am trying to become a whole person. And that's what the assimilation piece is about, is people who are blended and whole at the same time.
You know, Lenny, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you. I do, though, think of assimilation slightly differently because of just the way it's worked in the past. Assimilate is, you know, you come along and you take on the culture of the people who are there. Irish people are distinctly thought of as being white, as are Italians and Swedes and, you know, Germans. And Black people are specifically thought of as being African. We don't even get to be Ghanaian or Senegalese unless you know about those things. So I think in some ways it needs to be a pushback in the way that we are trying to be in the United States, that regardless of your color or your accent, and we're a long way from it, you're just an American. And I know from going to Ireland that many people think that I am African because I'm very dark skinned. I wear my hair the way that I do. They just don't think Americans look like me. They tend to think Americans are white. Irish is tended to be white. And so when you speak of, you know, my Blackness speaking to your Irishness, it's speaking to your white Irishness. But there, as we see in Grace, blended Irish people. When you go to Ireland now, there are people, and I've been traveling there for 20 years. It's gone from being really, really white to now I see people who have mad North Dublin accents who are Black, who are Chinese, who are Filipino, who are, you know, Latin American or Latino and they consider themselves Irish. Why is it that, you know, theater has the chance to make them be as Irish? It's a matter of identity. I'm Irish. I just happen to be differently colored, as Grace was saying earlier.
You know, Carletta, you're absolutely right. I was talking about assimilation in the most ideal sense, where there is no outside force forcing you to choose one, be one, you know, select one. You can't be all. Assimilation is tightrope walking, you know, like without a net, you know, because someone is always waiting for you to fall back into one or the other. But this, you know,
to pick up on what you were saying, because I mean that's been my life, like what, you know, being forced to pick one or the other, or at least feeling forced to pick one or the other. You know, my whole growing up in Ireland, I wanted to be white. I just wanted to be white. I just wanted to be, I used to say I'm Irish. But that means I'm white, you know, and that's all I just felt like I constantly defend the fact that I was Irish. And I wanted to have straight hair, you know. I used to put terrible chemicals in my hair just to make it straighter so I could be seen as the same as the people who were there. And, you know, in my brain thinking, okay, well, maybe this will help my career if I look more Irish and I look less, you know, curly hair. And I know, like, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but just to get back to what you said earlier on, Lenny, about my brother, about the line where I said I only saw my reflection when I looked at my brother. And it's because both of us have this mad curly hair. I have two other sisters, but their hair is completely different, and their facial features also. But me and my brother are both very not, like, we could never pass for Irish. When I moved here, I found myself, I'm black. Yeah, I'm so black, and getting really into being black and being Nigerian and just really into that side of my culture. And now it's like the pot. It's like, okay, I'm both. And why do I have to choose? And why is there no availability in the theater for me to be both? Like, why do I not get called in for black roles? And why do I not get called in for white roles? Why can I not just be called in for a role?
So we're really talking about a couple of different things. Again, we're talking about the identity of the artist as he or she enters the theater and the opportunities. We're talking about the lens through which the director, the playwright, the choreographer see ability, and we're talking about the acceptance of the audience to part the curtain of assumption and see you on that stage differently. And that, I think the theater can take all three of those roles on. The theater can reach past just I'm going to say this editorial, the mediocrity of colorblind casting, and look for soulful people, whatever shades they are, to reach. I think the theater can also provoke, invoke, agitate. Slave Story, if you have seen it, which I got to see in its rehearsals and then in its off-Broadway, and now which is 3 vignettes about mixed race couples that explode from an antebellum play into 21st century psychodrama, and you shift back and forth in who you're rooting for and who you think are the villain. I don't want to ruin it if you haven't seen it, but I think it's a brilliant work because it negotiates race, class, skin tone, ability. There are some really important works coming forth. There are also some really substantial arbiters of the American theater who are stopping the flow of that change. And Carletta, I'm so glad you are there because you have the part of the you have your gears on the flow, in your theater there, and you can cause opportunity, in a place of assumption. And I hope that made some sense at all.
Yeah, it did, Lenny. And I think it's important also to foster the notion that one person is not representative of the entirety. And that speaks to what you were saying, Grace, about, well, he got there first. One person is not the voice of their entire culture or the voice of their entire race. There's room for everyone to be able to contribute to exactly the type of opening of imagination in order to foster in reality the type of change that we want to see.
Marta Vega, who is the director of New York's Caribbean Cultural Center, Carletta, has a quote that says, "Within my race, there are many cultures." And you were addressing this at the notion of the monolithic Black, or for that matter, the monolithic Irishman, and I think we trivialize the depth of the writing of of the author of some of these characters by looking at them as monolithic people. And I think one of you ladies also said, you know, if you're Black in Detroit, you are nothing like Black in Georgia, or nothing like Black in Boston, or nothing like Black in Seattle. And working through this concept of the monolithic Blackness is an everyday chore for us.
Yeah, it really is. I think that, you know, working through the whiteness of people is something to take into account as well. You know, a white person living in Detroit is going to be different than a white person living in Georgia. I think the recent election has shown that pretty well. Also in Ireland, there is not a monolithic necessarily Irish person. There is a quintessential stereotype, especially here in the United States, of what Irishness is, what it means. The fact that, you know, many of white Americans are of Irish descent. What is overlooked is that many, many Black people in this country are of Irish descent. For example, our most recently elected or Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, everyone, you know, focuses on the fact that her mom is South Indian or Indian and her dad is Jamaican. Well, just by very fact of her dad being Jamaican, I can guarantee you there's Irish in her background somewhere. So we all probably have some Irishness deep, deep down inside. But culturally, we have Irishness as well. You mentioned river dance earlier, Lenny. Tap dancing is an outshoot, or an offshoot rather, of step dancing from Ireland. And it was through interaction back in the 1800s that one another. And so I think that there's a lot more interconnectivity or intersectionality that we can recognize that the theater can help to bring forward through writing, through being more aware, more mindful of looking at the human beyond their complexion and just seeing the ability to play the character.
This is the work that Mick Maloney and I do together for the last 30 years. We start with the banjo, an African instrument that is now thought of as the totally Irish and Appalachian instrument of choice. We talk about the bantuba, the dance place, where the juba, an African dance, and the Irish step and jig met and crossed over. When men in the mines and men in the canals and men on the railroads, men in the fields sang and danced and shared and swapped their common cultures. We look at the wake, grace, and the straw boy, and phenomena of charivari and parading, all of these things which are simultaneously Afro-Caribbean and Gaelic and Afro-Gaelic and all that mixed up, you know, to make American popular culture, music, and dance. And finally, we look at the songs. A book called Singing in the Master is one of our important, the look at the songs of the field that blended in their tunes. Songs of enslavement, like Amazing Grace, you know, which comes out of the sounds of an Irishman who was a slave trader, who was in a shipwreck and saved by one of the people he was enslaving, and wrote Amazing Grace, full of Irish tune, full of Black wailing, full of the experience of both of those people, now sang in 88 different countries, you know, and for every possible moment from birth to death, you know, a song which is neither and it's both at the same time. And I love, Grace, to look at Amazing Grace because in its DNA is truly the Afro-Gaelic experience.
And that's the experience that we should embrace. it seems that Miriam's having some technical difficulties. So at this stage, we'd like to welcome John Waters to the panel and just to thank Grace and Lenny for a really tremendous discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you all indeed. That was so terrific and stimulating. And there are so many points of connection that I'd like to bring up with you all in collaboration with the next set that I want to bring on. But I want to pick up on just a few things first. There are so many, this goes to what both Lenny and Carletta were saying. There are so many unwritten roles for Grace, right? That Grace as an actor is now in an America that has a history that has not yet fully come to terms with the Irish brown body, the Irish brown female body in particular, and how much of American history is carried through that body, speaking broadly. How much of our collective history is buried in the DNA of that great portion of us that Carletta was referring to about our new vice president's father, right? And so to go back to the theme about the arts and the question of what we can do, in a minute I'm going to introduce three colleagues here in New York who've been instrumental in developing conversations about how Irish arts organizations can be relevant to the social and political and cultural concerns that you've been exploring so articulately today. And I think in each case, that's about collaboration, right? And that what perhaps really we're speaking about today is the fact that Irish America has been constructed a certain way historically. And we need to do some work of undoing. And we need to undo through collaboration. Collaboration is the pathway for us to actually figure out what roles we want to play, right? And what roles actually lead us all towards a vision of justice and inclusiveness. And so that speaks as well, I think, to this question of how Irish America got constructed as a whites-only polity. That took work, that took labor. Undoing that is going to take work, it's going to take labor. But of course, it's a labor, I think, now that we can look at with kind of joy and excitement and think there's a path ahead for the arts in relation to questions of racial justice and of ethnic identity, and that historical set of forces and appetites and enmities that divided us in the past can be overcome now in the future and in the near future. So I think at this moment, I think what I'm supposed to be doing is introducing a few other folks coming into the conversation to represent Irish arts organizations. I hope I don't lose the rest of you as well as we do this, but I'm going to give the shorthand introductions with the knowledge that the long introductions are on the Irish Rep's webpage. But now I think we'll be joined by first Rachael Gilkey, who is there's Rachael. How are you, Rachael? Rachael Gilkey is the outreach coordinator and director of programming and education for the Irish Arts Center in New York. I'm also really pleased to welcome my friend George Heslin. George is there's George coming online. George is the founding director of Origin Theater, and he's now moved on, we're all pleased to say, to be the executive director of the New York Irish Center in Long Island City. And we're also going to welcome in Ellen McCourt. Is Ellen with us? There's Ellen coming on. Hello, Ellen. There's Ellen. Ellen did an enormous amount of work working with the Irish Rep over the years in solidifying and stabilizing the Irish Rep as a breathtakingly original and daring theater organization in New York City. I spoke to the question of collaboration, and what I'd like to do, but before we get to that, is introduce our last voice, and that's Lisa Fain. Is Lisa Fain coming on with us?
Yes. Hello.
How are you, Lisa? Good to see you. Welcome. Lisa is the general manager of the Irish Rep, and we have now with us, I think, a collection of voices who can speak to this theme of collaboration. And we can look forward and we can look back as we think about what that means. I'd like us to try to balance to be as much forward-looking as backward-looking if we can do that. I know as someone speaking from an academic organization. I hope that it's not, the echo's not on mine. As someone speaking from an academic organization, we have three responsibilities. We do teaching, we do scholarship, and we do public outreach. And I think the obligation on us is to do all three of those in dynamic relation as we can, to advance the issues that are most important for us. And now Miriam has now joined us again. So welcome back, Miriam. We'll include you. I jumped in impersonating you for a moment here. My pleasure, absolutely my pleasure, Miriam. So I was just saying that, I want to think about collaboration and how we can collaborate and what we can do going forward. But that leads me partly to look back to events like the recent Irish rep production 3-4 years ago, where Obi Abili was brilliant in The Emperor Jones as Brutus Jones, and where I brought my students in my Black Irish Identities class to a talkback that was incandescent with energy and potential that they could experience. And I know Rachael, the Irish Art Center, has just done a spectacular job of bringing Lenny and Mick's work before audiences on a regular basis, but also bringing a whole range of extraordinary figures from American culture and Irish culture together to conduct an ethical conversation about race. So I'd like to see if I can begin with Rachael and with you, George, and involve Ellen and Lisa as well, to sort of think about this question of collaboration and how you see the future, the near future, and what we can do together to bring it forward. So perhaps Rachael first, and then George.
Sure, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here and to share space with everyone here. I think it's been said that the Consul General said at the beginning that, it's a collective effort and a collective responsibility. I think, though we very likely may have been having this conversation had some things not happen, of course, the kind of global experience of a pandemic that has negatively affected brown and Black populations more than white populations. And of course, the murder of George Floyd, which brought the Black Lives Matter movement back into a spotlight in a sustained way, has, I think, reminded particularly this Irish community of the importance of creating something, creating an enduring and sustainable way of presenting work, Irish culture, in its true context, which is representative of multiple voices, not just those that you might assume to be Irish or Irish American. And so, I know probably many of my colleagues here, similar to Irish Art Center, part of that kind of commitment to finding enduring ways to continue to do this work, right, to both learn and act. We created a working group, which I chair, a diversity and anti-racism working group, which is a mix of board, staff, and our artistic community. And, buy-in from board, buy-in from staff, spending that time together to make sure that we are continually open to learning, particularly as gatekeepers and as white gatekeepers currently of this work. To me, that's the thing, that if we are doing this together and moving forward together on that kind of path, then we can serve our community, which is much more than a white community, much more better, much better.
Great. George,
thank you. Thank you, and greetings today from Long Island City, from the New York Irish Center. For those of you who don't know it, the New York Irish Center is just located over the 59th Street Bridge, 7 minutes on the 7th from Grand Central. And as you mentioned in the introductory, I was recently appointed as executive director here. So what's lovely about this organization is that, under the mission of the organization, we use 3 words here: community, culture, and care. What I'm learning in this new role is just how we serve a broader community. We happen to be the New York Irish Centre, but if we look at the diversity of the community that's at our doors, we are very close to the region of Sunnyside, Woodside, Jackson Heights. Jackson Heights is officially the most diverse zip code in America, I believe, for like 100 languages in the school system from here. So we have a big responsibility. All of us as organizations receive money from city and state money to create programming. So what we are doing here is we're really examining with our programming director, Stephen Long, just in terms of how we can broaden that conversation through culture, through social services. Irish people have always been inclusive in every area where we go across the world. We're people for inclusion. So that's one of the jobs here that I have at the New York Irish Centre, is really driving down and drilling into the mission of how do we serve a broader community. And it's very exciting to do that in a backdrop of all these great neighborhoods here across New York. And the other thing about the Irish Centre is that we have an opportunity here to do exhibitions and not just theatre. We have senior services, and we do serve a very, very broad community. So here with the board, we are working on diversity, which we are aware that we have to bring in at board level as well. As Rachael said, buy-in from everybody in the community to move this forward, But like I say, more than anything, it's great to have this conversation, and thank you to the Irish Rep for hosting this event.
That's terrific. Thanks, George. And again, like we all of us look at your appointment as just this opening up of possibilities, given everything that you did with Origin and the first Irish Theatre Festival, and broadening your outreach now. Ellen, is someone who's been so involved at the organizational level and at the institutional level in fostering Irish theatre. I wonder if you could say a word about this conversation that's gone on today and how you see it.
Well, we're tracking, I think, very much along the lines of the Irish Arts Centre, that we at the Irish Rep felt that we needed to educate ourselves first. The Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd was a catalyst for us. And I think we felt somewhat shackled by the notion of our own mission statement, that we were putting on plays of Irish and Irish American, both classical, as Grace mentioned, and modern plays. And so I believe we were looking at that mandate as being white. And we were not paying attention to the fact that Irish in Ireland and the Irish in the United States have changed. We heard that from Lenny and Grace and Kieran Madden and Carletta. So we have been looking at ourselves and re-examining our own mission statement and revised it. We now keep a spreadsheet open where anyone who has a reading or a video, an audio, can put in information that will move us closer to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And I can add, Ellen, that we took this position because people were moving forward, but we felt that we didn't want to just move forward. We really needed the change to be authentic and impactful. And in order to do that, we had to get beyond, as Ellen said, we were a little shackled by our mission. And also we had been given we had not been under the pressure as other organizations, non-Irish organizations are, to really dig into to this work. And so we acknowledge that we have presented works and have not challenged the idea of Irishness equaling whiteness. And so before moving forward, we wanted to make sure everybody had buy-in and also really understood that that was not a reality, that there is a reality about diversity, and about expanding our own limited concepts that we really wanted to deal with head first so that we could move forward authentically.
Well, and to that end, we've done exactly what the Irish Arts Centre has done, is to create a task force which has both board and staff buy-in, which is why you see both Lisa and myself on this panel.
Oh, that's all. That's it's wonderful to actually begin to see modeling of institutional collective behaviors that are actually thinking long-term about this, and they're also thinking collaboratively. I wanted to bring up something that was buried in the conversation that Lenny, Grace, and Carletta were having about the past and about the sort of histories of shared experience between and diverse experience between Black Americans and Irish Americans. And we're coming up on the centenary now of Irish independence, but it's also the centenary of the Harlem Renaissance. And one of the things that when I teach my course on the Harlem and Irish Renaissances together, it's always striking the sense in which several things, but first that the Irish Renaissance was a great inspiration to the Harlem Renaissance, and there are individuals who thread through the Harlem Renaissance and the Irish Renaissance. But a second point is that so many key figures in the Harlem Renaissance, had Irish blood, had Irish backgrounds, had Irish last names, and the collective amnesia, ability to forget that, to suppress it, to think that names like Hughes and Cullen and Fitzgerald are not Irish, or Lynch are not Irish. There's a sense in which America did a lot of work in building itself along the color line. And I wonder if I could hear from any of the participants today to think about the work of undoing the color line in the present by looking at the past and thinking about what are the works that you want to bring forward to either reinterpret in relation to what we were saying earlier, or to refashion and to bring alive. Lenny, you look like you're jumping to say something there.
Well, you set off three different trains of thought simultaneously. The first, of course, is that Harvard study on ebonics, ebony and phonics, was the first to notate that 38% of African Americans had at least one Irish ancestor. Now, I cannot believe that these were plantation owners raping Black women. That just didn't happen. These were men and women who were living outside of the common culture and therefore amalgamating in the best sense of that word. And that the miscegenation laws that came later would create the tension that we see in movies like Imitation of Life or Saratoga Trunk or Pinky, and in books like Loving versus the State of Virginia. So that was one thought is about the body of work that the stage can bring about otherness. Quickly, the second train of thought was of the centennial of Harlem and the centennial of Irish independence. And I would love for all of you to speak about the fact that jazz music was outlawed in Ireland at that same time, while that independence was while cultural specificity was being articulated, cultural infection or assimilation was being rejected. And so those two anniversaries. And then the third that you said was so many of the list in the roll call of the Harlem Renaissance were mixed race children and had no place to articulate or to celebrate that mixed race culture. So you just stirred it up for me there.
John, can I just jump in? Apologies for the technological difficulties I had, and thank you, John, for jumping in like that to help us out. Apologies to everyone on the panel and watching. My internet wasn't cooperating. I suppose one of the, you know, the themes that comes up and the mixed race identity. Grace, can I bring you back in terms of I know when we talked a few days ago in preparation for this, and Carletta and Lenny and I in different ways kind of shared thoughts on this, for the future of the face of Irishness in your son and in my children and in Carletta's and in Lenny's descendants and things like that, what gives you hope or encouragement in terms of how we navigate, you know, artistic spaces, cultural spaces, and the way forward? I guess, you know, what light do we see at the end of the tunnel for the next generation in comparison to your experience?
Well, I mean, my hope is that we keep continuing to have these conversations. We keep creating art, because there's healing in art, and I don't want to get too therapeutic on you, but there's healing in art, and there's art reaches a part of our brains that can really not manipulate, but change our understanding and allow us to almost like let go of everything and accept in this new information, and even if it's not new information, just accept in this information to change our psyche, to change the way the world, to change the way we see Irish people, and to note, and for everyone for future to not just think Irish and assume white, but just to think Irish and to assume from Ireland or Irish ancestry or just connected to Irish in some way. I hope that that, like, for example, I know we kind of touched on this the last time we spoke, but children's books, you know, I want my son to be able to look at a children's book and to see him and his family reflected in that. And the same for my nieces and my nephews. And I say my nieces and my nephews, but I mean like children across the world that are brown and black and also Irish. Or also white, you know, it doesn't matter. I know specifically now we're talking about Irish, and, you know, I'm Irish, so that's what I'm going to speak to. But yeah, children's books. There needs to be way more representation in children's books. In the media in general, there needs to be more places. Like, we need to open up these spaces and accept people of color into them. There's been all too many times that I've been in, you know, Irish spaces, and I've been the only person of color, and I'm always this, oh, where are you really from? Oh, but where are you really from? Like, let's forget the where you really from. I'm from Ireland, and I told you that. And now let's move on. Like, how can we communicate? How can we connect? How can we make this world a better place? What can I get from you? What can you get from me? What is our exchange that is going to grow in this world?
I couldn't agree more, Grace. And I hope that, you know, we didn't plan that as kind of a final question in that vein, but I hope that, as Kieran Madden has mentioned and as Rachael has mentioned, and maybe others, sorry, I was frantically trying to get back online, we're not at ground zero in terms of these conversations. All of us on this program here today are in different ways already part of this conversation. But I want to take this opportunity to commend the Irish Arts Centre in terms of taking the lead. And I hope that our call to action out of this event is that we do continue these conversations. And I mean that not just in it's a nice thing to say and we'll all go off on about our business. I feel very strongly that our voice is louder when it is collective. And we have, not everyone here today, but we have a great representation of the Irish New York cultural and particularly artistic institutions. And I hope that out of this, we will come together, bear witness, learn, and listen to what we need to do and action that in terms of how we can do more. I know that in the representation of Lenny and Carletta and Grace today, particularly through the medium of Grace's own piece, there's a lot of food for thought for us, and I hope that we will have meetings soon like this and more that we can build upon. And I genuinely, from my heart, want to commend the Irish Arts Centre, or Irish Repertory Theatre, for bringing us together in this vein, because it's meaningful and it's important, and we have to keep on doing it, to Grace's point.
May I say something very quickly, Mary?
Absolutely, Lenny.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with singing to the choir. It creates the sense of solidarity of voice, and this is a time where the choir needs to meet, where the choir needs to sing out of the same book. And so what I heard today is 3 conversations. How do we achieve diversity in the audience? How do we achieve diversity on the stage and in the cast? And how do we achieve diversity and inclusion in the body of work that we present? That's 3 kind of different tasks. You know, I can sit in the audience and enjoy a work that is totally about the Irish experience because I'm a human being, and I can feel the human. So I would encourage us to work simultaneously, to diversify the audience, simultaneously to diversify the work, not only the actors, but who's in the costume room, who's in the lighting booth, who's in, what kind of diversity can you bring to your organization as Irish organizations throughout, including the board of directors, so that when you hold your organization up to the light, rainbows come out.
Mm-hmm. But Lenny, don't you think that in order to diversify the audience, you have to diversify the actors on the stage? You won't bring in Black and brown people as audience members if they don't see themselves reflected on the stage.
I'm not exactly sure that I agree with you. I love La Traviata, but I don't see myself in that work. I love La Bohème and Brunhilde, but it is opening the experience to me. That may be the decision. If you only advertise in places I don't get information from, I'll never be able to experience it. So I think the work can be specific and the audience can be diverse at the same time. As long as you open up to that audience.
Yeah, if I could just expound on what Lenny is saying, Ireland is the land of 1,000 welcomes, and it's a matter of welcoming people into the audience. Lenny makes a good point. When you broaden your outreach, you will necessarily, I believe, diversify your audience, because you are now making it welcome for people who are not Irish to be in that space. They're welcome to come, because now you're reaching out to them to say, hey, we think you'll be interested in this. You may not be reflected on stage, but being a human being, as Lenny said, your experience can be reflected on stage.
Well, I do think these Irish institutions, because of there's that assumption that Irish equals whiteness, that we have to work even harder to dispel that, decouple that idea going forward. And that's something that the Irish Rep is committed to.
Folks, I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious of the fact that we didn't take any audience questions, but I'm leaving that to us as a challenge and a promise that we gather together in some similar space soon and continue these conversations with a commitment that they go beyond conversation, that they're action oriented. And I just want to thank all the panelists today, in particular Carletta and Grace and Lenwood, and of course George, Ellen, John, Lisa and Rachael. and the team at the Irish Repertory Theatre, Ciarán and Charlotte are backstage, and all the team behind making it work for us today. And please share, this is being recorded. Last night was recorded. Share the stuff on social media, get these conversations out there, you know, connect to each other. It takes work in terms of us making these connections. And I know we're all busy, but it's such a rewarding space to be in. And as we have said, there's no more an important time for us to be doing it. So on behalf of everyone here, wherever we are in this discombobulated world, thank you for taking the time for participating and viewing, and please come back and participate more with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Goodbye, ladies. Goodbye,
you.
gentlemen.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Grace. Bye, Carletta. Bye, everyone.